What's going on, Johnny Nation? Welcome to episode 186 of the Eye on the Storm podcast. My name is David Barov, and today's episode is sponsored by Mezzanine NYC, the St. John's apparel brand that is owned and operated by a St. John's alum. It is the home of the hottest t-shirt in college basketball, the Dylan Darling Church Bells caricature shirt. I bought one the second it was released. Justin, I know you did too. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, head on over to mezzaninenyc.com and pick up some awesome St. John's gear for the home stretch of the season. Support one of your own. Support mezzaninenyc.com for all the best St. John's graphic tees, hoodies, and more. He's got the license for the old school logos, the new ones, and he is tremendously creative in what he is making. So go on over to mezzaninenyc.com and pick up a Dylan Darling caricature shirt. Check out the new Zubie shirt and plenty more. There was absolutely no love lost in Rhode Island on Valentine's Day as St. John's went on the road and beat the Friars 79-69. The Johnnies had to overcome a hostile environment to improve to 20-5 on the season and 13-1 in the Big East. It's an 11-game winning streak now for the Red Storm, who have won at least 20 games under Rick Patino for a third straight year. I'm not sure which game was of higher priority for Providence fans this year. Georgetown's return with Ed Cooley coming back to town for a second time, or the return for the first time of Bryce Hopkins. Given what happened, given the social media fallout, I think it was Bryce's return that was circled in extra big marker for this season. The outcome of this game will be overshadowed by the atmosphere in the building, as well as the fight that took place in the second half when Duncan Powell chased down Bryce Hopkins, grabbed him by the head and face, and took him down. Elbows were exchanged, a fracas ensued, and chaos continued in the stands throughout the game. Providence fans showed up to Amica Mutual Pavilion on February 14th, not to watch basketball, but to boo and chant at Bryce Hopkins. And while I understand feeling slighted when a player leaves you for a conference opponent, the level of which Providence fans took it to was a bit unhinged. We would know, both of us were there. I'm here with Justin Kramer. We are back from Providence. We are back with a St. John's victory, but I think I can speak for you. That was the craziest atmosphere I've been inside of. That was the most insane basketball environment that I've been in. And I don't know if anything could ever possibly top it. Frankly, I think there's a time and place for exciting and insane hysteria for basketball. What we saw at the Amica Mutual Pavilion on February 14th was on a completely different level. I liken it to what we see in European soccer or basketball in those absolutely insane environments. The only thing was missing was people basically shooting off flares in the stands. It was insane. It was over the line, and I know we're going to get into it. And again, the atmosphere, the fight is going to overshadow the 10-point win by St. John's, and we're going to get into it. But my goodness, that was an insane day of basketball and an absolute insane 3.5 hours inside that building.
I cannot recall a time where I experienced anything remotely close to that. The feeling inside Madison Square Garden about a week and a half ago when St. John's beat UConn on their own court was electric. Both fan bases knew it was a statement game. Both fan bases were coming into that with a ton of momentum, having not lost games for several weeks or months. And it was a heavyweight fight with two quality basketball teams going toe-to-toe. Yesterday was something out of the WWE. The only difference is this was not a work. This was a shoot. And the problem that I see, listen, I know Bryce Hopkins left there, and I know it was not the best of terms. I know they think he quit on them. I'm aware of that. I'm not going to go there. What I'm going to simply say is that the behavior of those Providence players and the behavior of the Providence fans was shocking to me. Shocking because the best way to make a statement is to come out there and punch the other team in the mouth figuratively, not literally. Go out there and win a basketball game. You beat St. John's at Madison Square Garden, beat them again on your home floor, and say, listen, St. John's may be a Sweet 16 team, a Final Four team, whatever. We don't know. We'll see where it goes, but we beat them twice.
Mm-hmm.
Providence was up by 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
Providence had come back from double digits.
Mm-hmm.
Providence had all the momentum. And for no discernible reason, they decided to throw it all away to take a cheap shot, not just at Bryce Hopkins, but later on of Zubie Ejiofor. I don't understand it. I don't like it. And if I was a Friar fan, I wouldn't accept it. Something has to change. There's a culture shift that needs to happen. And if, putting the shoe on the other foot, if I saw this kind of behavior out of St. John's, I would be mortified. Just like the two priests were behind me when I was sitting in the stands, who looked like they were absolutely shocked and appalled by what they were seeing. This was truly something that was out of a Hollywood movie script, and it was just deplorable to watch.
I don't think I could be as diplomatic. I was right there. I know that the cameras were on the section that I was in the entire game. I was in the friends and family section. I was with Zubie's family. Oziah Sellers' family was right behind me. Ian Jackson's family was to my left. And the Hopkins family was 2 rows behind me. Everybody knew where the Hopkins family were sitting. And the Providence fans made it a point to let them hear it. Now, let's be very clear. I'm not a soft fan. I am all for Big East tough basketball. I am all for the rivalry. I am all for hating one another as a fan base. There's a line. Screaming F you, Bryce Hopkins, during the national anthem. A little ridiculous, but okay. I think I can move past that. Screaming at Bryce Hopkins' mom and dad and family, I understand comes with the territory. I know that Mr. Hopkins, Mrs. Hopkins came to that arena knowing what to expect. The team came into that building knowing what to expect. Zubie Ejiofor mentioned it in the postgame. Nobody coming into that game was naive to the fact that this was going to be sunshine and rainbows and a happy-go-lucky crowd. The problem was that crowd came to this damn game not to watch Providence win. They did not give a hoot what happened on the basketball court besides Bryce Hopkins missing shots and Bryce Hopkins potentially getting hurt. That's all the sold-out crowd cared about in that building that wasn't wearing red. Here's a few things that I will say right off the bat, because I'm seeing a lot of things being said on social media. And Justin, I'll let you chime in afterwards, but there's a lot of misinformation that's being put out there on social media. There is nobody in that arena that can speak to what happened better than me because I was there, especially in that section. Fact number 1. Bryce Hopkins' family was not kicked out of the game. Bryce Hopkins' family was escorted for their own safety down into the tunnel, and then they finished the game behind the St. John's bench for safety reasons. Why? Because there were multiple fans in our area, Providence fans, who were going back and forth with the Hopkins family the entire game. Those fans got kicked out. There were fans that were running down from other sections to give the Hopkins family a piece of their mind. Again, Part of me understands this. That's part of the rivalry. It's part of basketball. It's part of what happens in a situation like this. But there's a line. Security was all over that section the entire game. And no, that wasn't us complaining to security. That was them trying to make sure that nothing crazy happened. Directly across from our section was the fan base and the students. They were jawing at Bryce Hopkins' family in our section the entire game from before the national anthem, before the lineups were called out. Again, expected. But it gets to a point. And now let's go into the situation from the perspective of Mr. and Mrs. Hopkins. Again, you come into the game understanding what you're about to walk into. You know that this fan base hates you guys and hates Bryce Hopkins and wants you guys to fail, and we're jilted ex-lovers and you left us. There's only so much that you could probably take hearing an entire arena and specific targets at your son. It's different when it's St. John's, right? If it's targeted at the basketball team, that's one thing. But when it's your son, it's a little different. Justin, you have 2 children. I have children. I sat there through the entire game thinking about it from that perspective. There comes a point when you just can't keep your mouth shut anymore. And listen, there were no fights happened. Nothing got over the line. There were arguments. And yeah, Mr. Hopkins did go at it with fans here and there. Nothing crazy, but he did tell people to, stop jawing at him or be respectful or tone it down a little bit. There was that for sure, because how much can you take? There were people getting near the area that we were sitting, and it just gets to a point. And there was a lot of that. So that's why security decided to move the Hopkins family for safety. It was insane. Now, the actual fight that happened, what I was somewhat concerned about is that as the fight happened, just I don't know if you noticed this, but there was beer and bottles and cups and everything that started flying, especially from our right, where the student section was, and above the student section. That's where I was worried, where that stuff was going to kind of come flying our way, because everybody knew where the player's family was sitting. Luckily, nothing crazy happened, but that's just what you start feeling. Thank God nothing happened. And again, I want to be clear because there's a lot of talk out there. Nobody was calling security to kick people out. Nobody was screaming for fear of their safety. I don't think anybody feared for their safety. I certainly didn't. I didn't think that it was, anybody was going to come over and try to fight us or anything like that. But it was a very hostile atmosphere. And again, from the perspective of the Hopkins family and the players' family around us, it gets to a point. It was 0% respectful, and I understand that. But it was just over the line. The disrespect got to a point where it's hard to bite your tongue. And I certainly understand that. We are obviously biased because that's our guy in Bryce Hopkins. He came to play for St. John's, and I thought he handled himself phenomenally during the game. I think he deserves a lot of credit, even though he obviously had a very bad game. 3 for 14 to the excitement of the Providence fans. But I thought Providence fans were, while I understand, I thought Providence fans took it too far. I thought they were disgusting. I thought the way that things were handled in the arena, where there was not an announcement made to tell the fans to stop throwing things and be somewhat more tame, I thought was wrong. And the fallout from this should be harsh. And I'm very curious what's going to happen. Duncan Powell, should be ashamed of yourself. This isn't even a guy that played with Bryce Hopkins. And for him to do what he did, and we'll talk about the fight, to get up and flex on Bryce Hopkins afterwards like he blocked his shot or it was something impressive that he did, was ridiculous. Throwing an MMA UFC elbow at Dylan Mitchell, which he missed. Throwing another punch afterwards, which he missed. You're a clown, dude. You're an embarrassment for basketball. You're an embarrassment to Providence. You're an embarrassment to yourself. You have no business playing college basketball. You have no business being a representative of this sport. You are a clown. You are an embarrassment. There is no place for you and what you did in basketball. I don't care who hears it, and anybody who is defending it, you should be ashamed of yourself, period.
After the game, I was at a bar and there were several Providence fans there. And I was very happy. It was almost refreshing to hear that their analysis was, well, we know that there was going to be heat with Hopkins because of everything that transpired. But they said that Duncan Powell is a clown and he's got no business doing that. Jalen Sellers is a clown. He's got no business doing that. Jameer Jones is a clown, and they've got no business doing that. Now, I'm not going to reveal trade secrets, but they believe that English will be gone at the end of the season. They believe that a new coach will be here and that they're going to clean house because they thought this culture was a black eye on Providence College. However, to your point, what was going on inside the arena, not only with the beers being thrown and the targeted harassment of the Hopkins family, but I had a gentleman in a luxury box behind me who was one of the administrators for the college. Not going to name names, it doesn't matter, but it was an administrator for Providence College. And when my section of St. John's fans, and it was a lot of diehards in my section, we stood up and we were in shock at what we were witnessing. His comment was, "It's basketball. Something to be expected," as if like this was what you expect when you see a college basketball game against two rivals. And so my only point is that when you have administrators for the university making comments like that against fans of another team who, by and large, in my section, were very polite. We were away from the scuffle, but we were just in shock at what we were seeing. It starts from the top down. And if the administration is not only going to allow this to happen, but almost justify it, excuse it, say that this is what you'd expect to see, that's a fundamental problem at the university. And I'm not going to talk about the internal politics. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But that to me was as astounding as what I was seeing on the court, which was seeing administration almost justify or condone Powell's behavior on the court. It was shocking to me. And so at that point, what angers me is not just the fact that people could have been hurt, but that we're not talking about Dylan Darling and we're not talking about some of the players that put everything out there knowing that they were in harm's way potentially and showed up and won a basketball game against a rival. And that really is what has me kind of angry right now, that we're spending all this time, and understandably so, we're
Yeah.
spending all this time on everything that surrounded the game and not highlighting what we saw on the court, which with that 19 minutes aside and that foul on Zubie aside, there's a lot of takeaways from that alone. But listen, I get it. I understand we have to do this. And they really just need a change up there because this is toxic.
I have a really hard time moving past what's happening because I'm well aware that I'm a forward-facing representation, to put it lightly, and I don't mean that to be cocky, but I'm aware that I am vocal on social media. I put myself out there on social media, and I do so to try and be some kind of a voice for the fan base as well. And with this podcast, we bring news and entertainment as well to the fan base. The vitriol and attacks that we got on social media, that we continue to get, is what it is. That's what happens with fans. But there's an insane amount of Providence fans that are proud of what happened yesterday. I get a rivalry. I get the shit talking. I get the not liking each other. I don't care about that. As a human being and somebody that understands the nuance of sport, The fact that there's so many people within the PCBC, as they like to call it, the Providence burner Twitter community, that are so proud of what Duncan Powell did, that his play was just a quote hard foul. Who are you fooling? Like what is the point of having this bravado to try and stick up for a player that clearly did not make a basketball play?
He didn't even know Bryce Hopkins, right? Like you said, Bryce Hopkins wasn't on the team last year. There's no justification for it. And I don't mean to cut you off, but the reality is, I mean, listen, I do not have a social media presence. I don't get caught up in that. I raise money for the school. I try to win basketball games in my own way. Clearly, I'm not going out there and playing guard for the team, but I raise money. I try to promote businesses. That's what I do to try to do my part. The reality, though, is what you're seeing on social media is a very select group of people that feel the need to get their voices out there, people that need an outlet. They need their soapbox. But I want to be clear, this is not directed at the entire fan base. You're directing it at a very unique segment. I mean, listen, and I'll just tell a quick story. We were in Providence last year, great basketball game, Zubie at the buzzer, the whole bit. We were at a bar, we were enjoying some nice food before the game, and we met some of the nicest Providence fans around. They had a real perspective as to the issues the program was having, perhaps a way forward for the team to get out of the basement of the Big East. And they had a decent season last year, but like obviously it's gotten much worse. So I think it's fair to say that your comments are not directed at the entire fan base,
Right.
but a segment of the vocal fan base, which has basically stood behind the indefensible.
Listen, you, me, and our buddy John, we went to the game together, and we had some fun as we normally did. We had a Hopkins jersey. We were representing our guy, and we took a picture that we happened to be passing by a street that aptly was named Hopkins Street. So yeah, we took a picture of it in front of it. That's funny. That's cool. Whatever. Yeah, was it going to rile up some fans? Sure, it was. That's the fans having some fun. But when I get tweets of, hey, first person that punches this guy in the face, first guy that dumps a beer on this guy's head, I'm giving him $50. That's clown shit, man. What are you doing? And it is what it is. Listen, fans can be fans. It is what it is. I never once feared for my safety. I'm just saying that this is the kind of behavior that is out there right now with the Providence fans. That being said, to sit there and try and justify what happened on the court, the fouls, the fighting, you want to talk about, Justin, that Duncan Powell didn't know him. Who's the guy that pulled Bryce Hopkins away from the fracas to make sure that nothing crazy happened? It was Arunze, Providence player who was teammates with Hopkins, was the guy that pulled him away to look out for him and just to make sure, I guess, that nothing crazy would happen. Calvin Odie got kicked out of the game. Sadiku Ibine Ayo got kicked out of the game, and Ruben Prey got kicked out of the game for running off the bench. Understandable. Can't do that. Sellers got kicked out of the game for pushing and getting into it, I think, with Oziah Sellers. And, of course, Duncan Powell got kicked out of the game. Let's talk about a little bit more about it. I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but listen, that's what people care about with this game. Why the hell wasn't Duncan Powell immediately removed from the court? The first thing that the refs did in the arena, on TV, and everywhere was announce flagrant 2 for Duncan Powell ejected. And Duncan Powell stood there on the court for 19 minutes while they reviewed everything else. Did Duncan Powell make things worse? I'm not sure. But I know it's not a good look for the player that just committed the foul and started the fight to sit there on the court laughing through the whole thing. And as he was told to leave 19 minutes later, is jumping around happy-go-lucky and getting the fans super excited. And at one point, I saw Kim English, kind of hit him in the chest, kind of, I don't know, and I don't know what was said. So, but it looked like he was, hyping him up or something like that. Just nonsense. But the fact that he was allowed to stay on the court after he was ejected is insane. Where are the rules? Where are the officials? Why are they letting this happen? That you have a ticking time bomb essentially that just went off, and now another one. And then he's sitting there hyping the crowd up as if to be like, all right, let's go now. This is our time, only for them to immediately lose all momentum in the game after this fight.
No, that was the game. I mean, that
I thought that
was,
was
yeah.
ridiculous.
And it's not just that. There were other people on the bench, and I'm not going to claim to know who they were, but I saw multiple people on the bench, whether they were grad assistants or whatnot, again, like raising their hands and trying to get the crowd into it after the ejection, and it just made no sense. The only thing I can think of, and I'm not rationalizing, I'm not making excuses, I'm just pointing out the fact that it was a melee, and there were a lot of bodies on the court. Assistant coaches were on the court. Everyone is trying to separate everyone. The cops are on the court. Security's on the court. And I say that because if they didn't get Powell out of the arena for 19 minutes, they were trying to figure out who was getting thrown out, what happened, because it was complete chaos. And I think that it almost got lost in the shuffle. Should he have been escorted out to the tunnel right away? Yeah, but I think that they were just trying to get a sense of like what just happened, because it happened very quickly.
But my thing is, like, I understand that. I very much understand, especially because it was so long. They literally had like a notepad that they were writing down
Yes.
who it was. But the first thing that they knew for sure that they didn't have to figure out was whether or not Duncan Powell needed to stay in the game or not.
That was clear. I just think it got
So,
lost in the we have to
but that's
figure it out.
ridiculous. The
Listen,
guy who just clotheslined your player, that gave him a mandible claw in the midair, since we're going with wrestling references, and put him in a crippler crossface while 10 feet in the air, is ridiculous. I think that was a problem. Obviously, it was after the fight, but again, at that point, like, you have to start to, you know, not fan the flames, but like close the flames, and they didn't do that. I know Providence's GM was standing on the sidelines with Ed Cull as well, as they were monitoring the situation. Everybody was trying to calm things down, but like, I thought that could have been a moment where maybe the Providence AD gets on the mic or somebody like that. Somebody there says something. That's not uncommon. Like, that happens when things like this happen, and there was nothing like that said during the game. Again, heavy security presence, heavy police presence, understandably so. Um, but just crazy. And like, we
and
haven't.
not the end of it. And not the
Right.
end of it, because you could argue, again, semantics, I guess, but in the same breath as the Duncan Powell play, you've got Jameer Jones minutes later taking in a cheap shot at the Big East Player of the Year, who has nothing to do with Bryce Hopkins. All he is a guy that puts up 17 points and 8 rebounds and leads the team in every statistical category, right? The Big East Player of the Year and Zubie Ejiofor. Again, a little bit of hyperbole on my part. I acknowledge that. But the reality is, that cheap shot on Zubie when he's going up for a layup and he's literally pushed with 2 hands in the back like it's a flag football game or a touch football game, it only exacerbated it. I'm surprised there wasn't another melee. And credit to Zubie Ejiofor. You want to talk about a guy who's not only a team leader, but a man. He took his lump after that, and he sat there and he just laughed, because he knew that the team could not afford to lose him, basically the only big left on the roster at that point. But that to me was maybe even as more egregious than the Powell foul, because you can't even make an argument that he was going for the ball. He literally pushed him from behind, and the ball was 4 feet over his head.
Yeah,
That to me was a disgusting play just the same.
the fight happened with about 14 minutes left in the game. The Jameer Jones foul happened 5 minutes with 5 minutes
Yes.
left in the game. Kim English was more upset about the Jameer Jones foul than he was the Duncan Powell foul, which was ridiculous. I guess, and afterwards, I will say that Kim English did say that, there's a place and time for hard basketball fouls. I think we can all agree on that, but you don't go for the head. Kim English said that, and the fact is that, like, Jameer Jones's play was 0% basketball. He looked like he turned around to Kim English on the court and said, "Oh, I was trying to stop him from dunking the ball." Like, get out of here, dude. Like, you pushed him in the back didn't like go up to try to block the ball. You clearly like pushed him almost into like the padding of the hoop. It was uh, not a basketball play. You really could have injured him at that point. Like it's clearly they're just like screw it. Like we don't care about this game. And Kim was like he was like pissed off. He's like, oh, I can't believe that my guys are doing this. Like really? Like you just saw what happened 10 minutes prior, and you can't believe that your players would do that. There is a lack of culture there. There is a lack of leadership. There is a lack of them listening to their coach, it seems. And I hope, I hope, and I would like to think that Kim English and the Providence program is above this, but I really hope that they didn't go into this game with like this in mind and hoping to start something like this. Obviously, their season has gone in the toilet. They were one of the most talented teams coming into this year. I picked them to finish fourth this year, and they certainly have not done that. And for them to, I'm sure the pregame hype speech was probably like, hey, we got to take it to him. You saw what this guy did to us. Like, and I get that. But I hope that there wasn't intention to do this. I would like to think that Providence is above that. I would like to think that Kim English is above that. But it's hard to not have that in the back of your mind. With all the emotion going into this game, with all the vitriol from the fan base and what they are so upset about, I hope that that's not the case because that would be even more upsetting.
I don't know. All I can say is if I'm a basketball coach and I'm beating the number 17 ranked team in the country by 1 point on my home court, and I get two guys, one key guy, just absolutely kicked out of this game, giving
He was the
St.
best player on the
John's.
court.
He was taking over this game, and obviously I'm talking about Sellers. But
Mhm.
when you give St. John's four free throws in the ball when you're up one, that was the end of the game. And I whispered to my wife, I said to her, like, listen, that this was the end because not only is St. John's going to take the lead here, but no, they don't have a guy who's going to control the offense without Sellers on the court. And
Yeah.
so I knew the game was over. But in the next breath, I said, you know something? I want Zubie and Hopkins in a perfect world off the court because I just saw the powder keg
Yeah.
getting ready to explode. And if they had had a 20-point lead, I would have put in, guys that not to say that you don't want to see this happen to anybody, but you certainly can't afford to happen to Zubie Ejiofor.
Well, your only options were Ian Jackson and left Terrence Leotopoulos were the only two guys on the bench.
And we'll get to that because I think that is a very,
Agreed.
very, very telling point about this game. But I mean, at the end of the day, you just got to look for your player safety. And I actually had concern that they were going to go headhunting after the Jameer Jones foul because I said there's 5 minutes left, just get him off the court. I was almost hoping they were going to call the game because after the first one, they should have issued warnings to the bench on both sides and said if there's a retaliation at this point, it's a forfeit. And I mean, that's how close we were to literally just having this thing called, but they never did. And when Jones hit Zubie from behind, I said, this is, we're getting to the point now where player safety is truly something to be concerned about.
And I will credit the refs, and James Breeding was there, and you'll never hear me credit James Breeding. Nathan Farrell was there. They gave him the hook immediately as soon as the push happened. Like
Yes.
you saw Breeding go, you're out of here. Like it was no thinking about it.
Immediate.
There was no discussion, which was good. All right, let's get a little bit to basketball. The first half, I think we can argue St. John started this game probably better than they had any game that I could think of this season. It was on the road.
Since the first Providence
Yeah,
game,
probably,
ironically
yeah.
enough.
Yeah. And that was 11 games ago. They just came out really, really hot and for 3 for 5 from deep to start, it was great. I mean, 15-4 right out the gate. Ian Jackson scored 7 of St. John's first 15 points. We'll talk about him in a bit. And then they kind of just, let PC get back into it. St. John's had a 25-12 lead. It really felt like it could get out of hand right away. And credit to PC, they came back to it. Sellers was a big part of that. He had 13 points and 7 rebounds in I think 20 minutes of play. So he was solid. So St. John's kind of let them kind of come back into the game. You go into halftime, you're all right, whatever. Not great. St. John's didn't rebound the ball well. Thought Providence kicked their ass on the glass. St. John's couldn't get to a lot of offensive rebounds. That was hurting them. And you're kind of moseying along, and you're like, all right, let's see what happens. But then 14:25 left in the second half, and it's 40-39, like you said, and then that's where the fight happens. We talked about the fight. We're not going to go into that anymore. The biggest thing is what happens after the fight. Bryce Hopkins made his 2 free throws. Huge. Oziah Sellers makes another free throw. Huge. And St. John's responds with an 8-0 run after that. In a moment where the crowd is at full throat, that you could have everything collapse on your head with no bench, 2 guys left on your bench, no Dylan Mitchell, because Mitchell was part of the guys that were thrown out. Again, let me say this. I still have no idea why Dylan Mitchell was thrown out. Allegedly, there was a shove. I don't think you could see it on the video. I didn't see it when it actually happened. I don't know why he was thrown out. I think when you watch the replay, Rick Patino was pretty surprised that Mitchell got kicked out of the game. That's, again, odd. But again, you lose a guy like Dylan Mitchell. Insane. Mitchell was having a really impactful game, had 6 assists, which was wild. He was finding everybody. He only had 5 points, but 6 assists and was getting boards. But the way that St. John's responded to the fight is a huge storyline. Again, grit, toughness, guts, like we've been talking about the last few games. 8-0 run after being down 40-39 in a huge fight like that won them the game on the road, because Providence, the players, they had no idea, no answer after that. So huge credit to St. John's on how they answered. I thought it was huge. Dylan Darling, we're about to get to him. Just how he stepped up in the second half was monstrous. And, you kind of look back, Justin, to that first Providence game. And what did Rick Pitino always say? He's like, we didn't play bad in that game. We had a bad 4 minutes. Well, bad 4 minutes led to the lone loss of the year. So while PC was going into this game basically, F Bryce Hopkins, and that's our motivation for this game, St. John's was probably going into it like, hey, we got to get another road win. Let's get a revenge for our only Big East loss and prove that we're a different team. The toughness that St. John's has displayed over this 10-game stretch prior to this game, I thought was again on display for the absolute grit that it took to respond in a situation like that, the maturity that it took to respond in a situation like that, and the leadership of the guys that are on the court, from Zubie to Dylan Darling to Bryce Hopkins to everybody on that court, to respond in that situation was really commendable.
And I'm happy that we're actually going to talk about some basketball now, but this is a workmanlike performance by a very good basketball team. You're not going to go into a place like Providence in an environment like this and just beat them by 45 all the time. There are times where good basketball teams have to go on the road and pick up a W by any means necessary, and that's what St. John's did. And they did it in a way that was, again, reminiscent of last year with that toughness and that grit, because it wasn't a great shooting performance by the team in red. They shot 38% from the field, 28% from 3. Not stellar numbers despite the hot start, because with about 12 minutes left in the first half, all of a sudden they couldn't hit a shot if their lives depended on it. They went for about a 5-minute stretch where they didn't score, and that's what allowed Providence to really get back in the game in the first half. And so I say that because, again, good teams will win games like this. Not that they're sleepwalking through it, but it's just a very workmanlike, gritty performance. And that was very good to see. But, it's interesting. We talked about one of, if not the biggest strength for this team, was their depth. Not that they play 12 guys, but that they have 12 guys that they can go to. And it was on full display in this game. you know, Odie doesn't get a ton of minutes. I look forward to seeing his development as he becomes a sophomore because there's flashes of brilliance there with his rebounding. He wasn't available. Io, Io, a glue guy for this team, shockingly comes off the bench.
Oh, he was like the
And
first guy ready to fight.
I know. And you know something? I don't condone running off the bench. I know you can't do that. But Io is the consummate teammate. Rick Patino knows that, and I think he gets a little bit of a pass. He wasn't throwing punches. He just got thrown out for sticking up for his guys.
What I want to say, Justin, in that fact, and again, we don't condone fighting. We don't condone that behavior.
Not at all.
There's a difference of having your guys back and being there for your teammates than throwing elbows and going nuts at a guy's head and trying to rip his head off. Io was trying to have his teammates back. So was Prey and so was Odie.
That's right.
So was Sellers, by the way. Sellers was ready to scrap too. Even our Sellers, nothing happened, but yeah, he was ready to.
He had fire in his eyes
too.
Yeah, no question. But I say that just to illustrate the fact that you've lost four guys. And listen, Prey's going to give you some time in the second half if he's in the game. But with him gone and with Mitchell gone, which is obviously you're talking at that point 12 more minutes of basketball at least from the time that he was ejected. Again, thank God for the depth because they had guys that they could go to with Sannon and Lefty and Jackson and whatnot. And we'll talk about that in greater detail. But thank God for the depth. And thank God for Dylan Darling because Dylan Darling, I'm not saying it's becoming his team. It's his Zubie Ejiofor's team, and everybody else has their big role to play. But Dylan Darling, his performance yesterday and the improvement that I have seen from November to now is incredible. And somebody said to me, that was the best basketball I've seen from a guard in as long as I can remember. Not just the 23 points, not just the fact that he didn't turn the ball over, but the 3 steals and the 8 rebounds. And we'll talk about that. I want to hear it from Rick himself when we queue up the post game. But Dylan Darling's performance was one of those, I'm not letting the team lose. I'm going to take them on my back, and I'm going to get this W, and then I can look forward to Marquette on Wednesday.
Dylan Darling continues to write chapters of this season. He's a big reason why there's an 11-game winning streak right now. And his last 3 games, the performance has been phenomenal. So let's get into what Rick said, and we're gonna go back into the fight and what he said because it's gonna dovetail into everything we're just talking about here. Here's Rick Patino on the fight, as well as his thoughts on the Providence fans being there for the wrong reason.
You're not supposed to come off the bench, but you can't let your players get beat up. So.
Did they tell you what Dylan did? Because we didn't see anything.
I didn't see it. And look, it was a tough game to officiate. Certainly, the crowd, I think, lost objectivity of what they're here for. If they're just here to poke fun at Bryce Hopkins and not get a win for the Friars, that's not the Friars I remember in '87. So I think you got to try to win. And we're really excited to get a W because we were without a lot of players, and we still came away with a victory. So I'm proud of our guys.
Justin, Rick said it. He's like, hey, these aren't the fans that were here when I was in '87. Their motives clearly were different in this game. I get it. I said it. He said it. I think most people understand that. Again, it's a shame. But Rick went on to talk about toughness and how you respond in a situation like that. And toughness is not fighting. Toughness is, what do you do to dig in deep in adversity? What do you do when you get punched in the mouth? Not literally Duncan Powell, but what do you do when you're on the road in a hostile environment and you're losing? What do you do between the lines? Here's Rick.
One thing you can understand, we didn't initiate anything. We talk toughness is not turning the ball over, creating steals, getting offensive rebounds. That's what we believe toughness is, and that's all we talked about throughout the entire time. And we made some big plays. My guys were tired. Zubie was tired, and he said, one time, I don't want to hear that nonsense. Nobody's tired. And I'm sure he was exhausted.
And so Rick talks about Zubie telling everybody to, hey, nobody's tired. Don't look for the bench for help. We're fighting through this and we're going to win. That's what toughness is. Getting rebounds when you're tired. Getting steals when you're tired. Playing good defense when you're tired. And then, Justin, here's Rick Patino on that toughness and why Dylan Darling is your quintessential player that you want on the court in moments like that.
Yeah, we feel toughness is getting steals, getting rebounds, getting deflections, setting great screens. I think that's what we describe as toughness. We don't think you can't fight. Back when I was the Kentucky coach, we fought almost every SEC game, and it was not a big deal. But you can't fight anymore, so toughness has to come between the lines.
Did you see more of that toughness of setting screens and after the?
Yeah, I think. Look, this young man here, rebounding wise, he just has a mindset. I'm going to get that rebound, and I think it's a valuable lesson for all the other players, from Ian to Joe's son, all the players there, to see what he did on the backboard to grab rebounds with the game on the line. So he's having a great second half of the season. He deserves it. He's a hard worker. He's a great guy. He's epitomizes what you want in an athlete, in a basketball player.
I don't know what else we could say about Dylan Darling. You've called him a bulldog, tough, every adjective, but he continues to raise his game. He continues to be a leader. 23 points, 8 rebounds, 8 of 9 from the line, 3 steals, 18 points in the second half. 16 of his 23 points were scored after the fight. No turnovers in 27 minutes. He came into the game with 16-12 left in the second half. Didn't sit the rest of the way. Scored 10 points in his first 4 minutes on the court at that stretch. 8 straight during a 13-3 run that gave St. John's the control for the entire game. Dylan Darling in his last 3 games, 15.3 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 2 steals per game, all wins, clutch shot after big 3. And Justin, I have a Google search up on my computer right now, and it's a list of the heaviest bells in the world. And I don't know, which one should I pick from? Because the church bells that he once had got upgraded in the last game. And I said it was the bell from Notre Dame where Quasimodo swung from. And I don't know, the Vox in Patrie is on here. It weighs 121,000 pounds. I think that's close to what he's got in his shorts at this point. I mean, Dylan Darling, you're becoming a fan favorite, and you're becoming a Johnny for life at this point.
Let's not forget he's got another year. And I actually was going to kick it back over to you because I wanted, what is this kid's ceiling? Because the last 3 games, he's playing like an all Big East player.
Yeah.
And again, it took him a while coming from Idaho State, different brand of basketball. And you saw flashes of it earlier, and you also saw some deficiencies earlier, but the deficiencies are slowly getting masked. And he's shooting the ball a lot better. He's hitting clutch shot after clutch shot, like you just said. Where do you see this kid's ceiling? Not to go on a complete tangent, but I don't see how you can't talk about Dylan Darling after this performance.
Justin, we were talking about it last night, a few friends and I, and I think Kevin Connolly, Storm the Paint, brought this up in a group chat that we had. Is Dylan Darling the 6th man of the year in the Big East at this point? In this 11-game stretch, he has put St. John's on his back. He's had about 5 games in which he's pretty much responsible for them winning. And we were trying to come up with who else could potentially be in the running against him. Maybe Devin Askew at Villanova? Maybe. But man, if St. John's keeps winning like this and Dylan Darling continues to, swing his church bells in everybody's face, how do you deny him? So his ceiling this year is obviously continue to lead St. John's off the bench. I don't think you mess. By the way, I'm hearing a lot of people ask this: should they put Dylan Darling into the starting lineup? Hell no, hell no. It ain't broke, don't fix it. Do not tinker.
Who's out there at the end of the game? And Rick Pitino will always say that. I
Always
tinker with my starting lineups. Rick
said, I don't
Pitino,
care. I don't care about who starts.
no, it's a token gesture. And listen, we're all superstitious in our own ways. Rick Pitino is not changing this starting lineup until they lose a basketball game. And even then, he may not change it. But I will bet you money that if healthy and able, he will keep the same starting lineup through the national championship game, should they be fortunate enough to get there. But ask yourself who's on the court in the final 5 minutes. That's all you need to know.
It's not who starts, it's who finishes. Here is Dylan Darling, in his own words, on stepping up, the team being fired up after the fight, and what Rick thinks has elevated Darling's game. Here's a hint. You heard it at the start of the show.
You try not to think about it, but definitely some of us needed to step up without, our leader, D. Mitch, one of our leaders, and somebody needed to step up, and I just try to bring energy, and we were fired up from the exchange, but just try to bring energy. And
what you don't realize, he had 8 rebounds in the game, and they were all tough. And ever since he got that T-shirt made up, he's just got brought to a new level.
Justin, all it takes is getting some T-shirts made. That's it. Just a few T-shirts being made with your face on it. In all seriousness, and I've said this I think a few times already on the show, but Dylan Darling will be back next year. Dylan Darling's NIL might be getting a bump if he keeps playing like this. But in all seriousness, Dylan Darling's going to have a C on his chest next year. That C is going from Zubie Ejiofor and Sadiq Ubine Ayo and Dylan Mitchell to Dylan Darling next year. And think about this. We talk a lot about Rick Pitino's development, and the proof is in the pudding. In the last 3 years, Zubie Ejiofor's improvement, Danis Jenkins' improvement, Dylan Darling's improvement. Look at Dylan Mitchell's improvement. Kadari Richmond's in the NBA.
Hitting threes.
Davon Smith is in the NBA. Walter Clayton's in the NBA. Rick gets credit for all this, right? And Rick's now helping turn the Big Sky Player of the Year, the guy who everybody said, can he play at this level? I don't know. He's too small. He's slow. He can't do it. Turning him into potentially the 6th man of the year in the Big East and the captain of St. John's in his senior year. A guy who's going to know Rick Pitino's system, that is going to be Rick Pitino's guy that he relies on to run the offense potentially. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to be the starting point guard next year or he's going to be the guy that they build around. But can't you see him used in a very similar role like this, coming off the bench, playing 25 minutes, being the guy that everybody looks to when, shit hits the fan? Dylan Darling is turning into a Rick Pitino guy who is going to be relied upon for next season, and the value in that for St. John's. Can't put a price on it.
St. John's is going to have a lot of new faces next year, but Dylan Darling is going to be the guy they build around. And that doesn't mean he's playing 38 minutes a game and scoring 30 points. I'm not suggesting that for a second. But when they look at the pieces and they have to plug the holes, and there are a lot of holes they're going to need to plug for obvious reasons, they're going to build around that. And Dylan Darling is going to have that C on his chest next season, and he's going to be expected to shoulder the burden in a way much as Zubie and Dylan and Ayo have this year. And so I look forward to that. But I just want to mention one other thing about this game. And it's not about the fight. It's about Bryce Hopkins' performance. Yeah, he went 3 for 14 from the field. He did not have his best game. He played 35 minutes, but he missed shots. He obviously he was affected, maybe not his affect, but you could
He
tell
was
that
pressing.
he was pressing. We would be remiss not to talk about the 9 rebounds
Mm-hmm.
because he led the team in rebounds. He was not efficient offensively, but that toughness that Rick Pitino was looking for earlier in the season, we've got that. And I want to go ahead. You're itching. I can see.
I'm just let me play what Patino said about Dylan Darling because it actually translates to what you're
Yes.
talking about with Bryce Hopkins. Here's Rick Pitino on Darling's toughness and the message it sent to everybody else on the team that needs to pay attention to what Dylan's doing. And I think in some way, it's also what Bryce did yesterday as well.
This young man here, rebounding wise, he just has a mindset. I'm going to get that rebound, and I think it's a valuable lesson for all the other players, from Ian to Joe Son, all the players there, to see what he did on the backboard to grab rebounds with the game on the line. So he's having a great second half of the season. He deserves it. He's a hard worker. He's a great guy. He's epitomizes what you want in an athlete, in a basketball player.
Justin, that's it right there. To see him get the rebounds, playing tough through adversity, eight rebounds, defensive rebounds for a guy that's 6 foot in a game like that. That's huge, and that speaks to what Bryce did because he didn't allow a 3 for 14 shooting night to
That's right.
stop him from doing the intangibles. And
There,
that's what the issue I believe is right now with Ian Jackson, more so, which I know we're going to touch on.
there were games earlier this season when guys, and Hopkins was one of them, would have a poor shooting performance and they would let it affect every other facet of their game. Their defense would suffer, their rebounding would suffer, their grit and toughness wasn't there. You're not seeing that now. You're seeing guys play through a game where they may go 1 for 5 from 3 and they're playing as hard as possible. And that is why they are on the court. And that is why this team is on the winning streak that they're on.
Yeah.
Flip the page. Ian Jackson, and you said this earlier, he had that quick 7 points, and it's why St. John's got out to the big lead. It's why St. John's had that cushion that even though Providence got back in the game, they never found themselves down by a lot. But when 4 guys get ejected and the bench is small, Ian Jackson was glued to that bench. And so while we're talking about that toughness and the grit and the winning streak and all these positives, we have to point out the fact that for about 12 minutes with no bench, Jackson didn't see any playing time. And that is concerning if you're a St. John's fan. Listen, it's February 15th. I don't know when it's going to be figured out, and I use that term in quotes, but the reality is that is disheartening if you're a St. John's fan, because this was a guy who was expected to play 32 minutes a night. And when there's 7 guys on the bench in total, there's 7 guys that you can go to. Ian Jackson did not play. And I hope for his sake, he's got all the offensive talent in the world, but Rick Pitino was on him. And you're not going to see this on TV, but when you watch the interaction between Pitino and Jackson, there was a lot of criticism for his play, being in the wrong spot, not playing through screens, things like that. Criticisms we heard earlier this season. If this team is going to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, Jackson has to perform better. He has to be able to help this team on both sides of the floor. I'm not saying it's too late, but seeing him glued to that bench was disheartening for me as a fan.
When is figure it out time? Like you said, February 15th. Why are we still asking this question? 7 of their 15 points, getting to the rim twice on the dunk, layup. He hit a 3. He finished with 9 points. He scored 2 points the rest of the way. It was 2 garbage time free throws. He got put in there at the end of the game like a walk-on. In a game where only 2 players were available in Ian and Lefty for 14 minutes, you only played 4 minutes in the second half. 2 to start, basically, and 2 to finish. And I totally get riding the hot hand. I'm not saying he should have been in instead of Darling. But before this game, Rick Pitino did say he wanted to play Ian Jackson more at the 2. He said, I got to find him more minutes in that role. And then he's on the bench. And you have to ask why. Defense has been Ian's Achilles heel all year. His lack of rebounding has been his Achilles heel all year. His lack of doing other things besides scoring has been a big Achilles heel. And not boxing out or plays that lead to scores that Ian is in the area for is something that Rick Pitino has really been getting on him about. We see it from the stands all game. We see it on TV. Ian has to do the other things. That's clearly what's happening here. I don't think that this is Rick Pitino has something against Ian Jackson. Rick Pitino's trying to win basketball games. That's why Dylan Darling's been out there. And we said it on this show a month and change ago. We want to see Darling and Ian out there together at the 1 and the 2. Let's see Ian Jackson in his natural position, quote unquote. It's worrisome, Justin. I agree with you. It's February 15th. How are we still talking about Ian Jackson needing to figure it out?
There's a golden opportunity against the Golden Eagles coming up this week. Marquette is not a great basketball team. We know this. This is not the typical Shaka Smart team. And Ian Jackson will be out there starting this game. I hope that he kicks it into high gear this week against a team that he's going to get his open shots. He can defend against this team. The guards are not going to blow by him. Now is the time to answer your question. Now is the time, because as we get into March and as we get into the Big East tournament, I don't want him to find his footing in the tournament. I want him to find his footing on Wednesday. I want him to go out there. I want him to play 25 minutes. I want him to score 13 points, but I want him to defend, and I want him to be in the position to grab rebounds, box out, and do all the little things that Rick Pitino requires to get his players to win basketball games and make each individual a better basketball player. Now is the time, and I want to see it.
Everybody's talking about a New York guard in the Big East. It's not Ian Jackson. It's Nigel James. He plays for Marquette. That should bother you. Ian Jackson came to St. John's to be the man. Homecoming, all that. Time to figure it out. Justin, our big man in the middle, Zubie Ejiofor, not a great game. 14 points, 10 in the second half, helped lead them to the win. Only 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. I thought Zubie had trouble with their bigs. I thought Zubie was, had some issues really getting to the rebounds. I thought Providence did a good job with that. Zubie went 4 of 7 from the floor. Zubie Ejiofor can't take 7 shots. He can't take only 7 shots. I'm sorry. That can't happen. And credit to Providence. I thought they did a great job on him. But Zubie Ejiofor can't take 7 shots. He's too good. He's too valuable. Thought he was tentative a little bit on the mid-range shots a few times that he had opportunities. But, when it mattered most, 10 points in the second half. He did get a few of those tough layups. But, again, I just wanted to bring that up. Oziah Sellers, I thought, he is still struggling from 3, really, really desperately trying to get them to fall. 11 points. He did make a few really solid mid-range shots that came at really key times. So credit to him for kind of fighting through that. Joe Sannon with 5 points. Not a great game. Again, I mentioned Dylan Mitchell, 5 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals in very limited minutes. And then Bryce, 9 points, 9 rebounds, 2 steals in a very, very tough environment. Rick mentioned how he might not say it, but he knows that it kind of weared on him. It's tough to deal with that kind of situation. And, he had a bad game. He wanted some of those threes to fall. Those layups were killing him to miss, especially that last one that literally rimmed off the top. And even Bryce laughed about it because he was just like, are you kidding me? This is the kind of game I'm having here. But I credit Bryce a lot for how he handled himself in this situation in that environment. Um, it definitely wasn't easy. I'm sure it was very emotional, and I'm sure part of him wanted to rip Duncan Powell's head off too. But when you handle yourself with maturity like that in tough situations, that shows character, that shows a level of the type of person that you are. He understood the importance of the game in the moment and what he meant to the team. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. I know, much to the chagrin of Providence fans who would really disagree.
He's rounding it into form, and he has been. Again, not every game is going to be the most efficient performance, but you're seeing more aggressive play, trying to take the game over and doing it in a way. By the way, he, despite not having the best game, he only had one turnover. So he had the ball a lot, and the shots didn't fall. But there's times in a long season which galvanize a team, or at least have the opportunity to galvanize a team. Earlier in the season, St. John's wilted in some of these games down the stretch, but in this one, with Providence trying to stick their foot on St. John's throat, St. John's persevered. I hope that they look back to this game, not just because they won on the road, but because of the fight and the energy and the emotion. And they take this and they use this as the next stepping stone to the end of a potential Big East championship run. They're close. They are still tied with UConn atop the standings. It still bothers me when I see UConn, by the way, on top of St. John's, considering St. John's owns the head-to-head, but whatever, that's a separate conversation. Use this as the fuel to take that next step, improve the offensive efficiency, tighten up the defense, get those rebounds, and stop giving up those second chance points. And let's continue to let the good times roll as we look ahead deeper into the Big East and into March.
Yeah. And again, the things that happened in this game that happened all year, St. John's got to the line 30 times. So all that talk this week about, the favorable whistle for St. John's, and they're giving them the game. No, every single game they're getting to the line a million times. So 21 for 30 from the line. And again, they're turning you over. 14 Providence turnovers led to 14 points for St. John's as well.
And only 5 turnovers for St. John's. Can you think of a better game in terms of handling the ball, handling the pressure, the atmosphere?
Okay. Yep.
Providence could not stop St. John's. They missed shots, but they could not turn them over. And that is huge because that is Rick Patino basketball.
Absolutely huge. St. John's improves to 20-5, 13-1 after the win against Providence by 10 points. Justin, a little perspective for you. Since 2000, St. John's had won 20 games just 5 times until Rick Pitino came to Queens. You remember because we used to do these on the phone all the time. We used to pray and calculate the Big East schedule and calculate the regular schedule. How are we going to get to those 10, 11 wins in conference and 20 wins overall so we can get to that like six mark in the Big East and get to the tournament, as like a 9 seed. I vividly remember those conversations.
How do we avoid Dayton?
Yeah.
But get into the tournament. Not do well, but get into the tournament.
Those are legitimate conversations that we have had going back 4 or 5 years. Even Rick Pitino's first year, I think we had those conversations in preseason, if we're being honest. They've won 20 games in all 3 seasons under Rick Pitino. St. John's has now won 10 straight road games in the Big East, the longest streak in program history. And the Johnnies have now won their first 7 road games to start the season for the first time since the 29-30 season. That's pretty good, to quote Larry David. The Johnnies fly to Wisconsin on Wednesday to play Marquette. Justin, St. John's is number 17 in the country right now. We're going to see, I think they might pop up a game or a spot or two, maybe get to that 15 spot. Getting a road win in Providence by 10 points should hold a little bit of value. Obviously, you got a win earlier in the week as well. The efficiency numbers, I think, are tough. St. John's offensive efficiency numbers are kind of going down. It's something that we should keep in mind and keep a look at because it's important. Apparently, you got to be a top 10, top 15 team in the offensive efficiency in order to win it all. So Johnnies who were in that 22 range about a week or two ago have kind of gone down for some tough results. But at the end of the day, they're winning games. And that's what matters. 11 games in a row. The Johnnies are 20-5, 13-1 at the top of the Big East with UConn. Bring on the Golden Eagles as they fly to Marquette and try to make it 12 in a row. Obviously, Justin, tough game because can't drop this one. This is a season killer if you drop it. Obviously, not fully for St. John's, but you got a lot of equity that St. John's has built up, so can't drop this one.
You look at that coveted 4 seed or better in the NCAA tournament. This game doesn't really provide much value in terms of moving up a line, obviously, but you're going to move down a line or two if you lose this one. You have to win this game if you have any shot at being a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament.
That's right. So you got to take care of business. Let's see what the fallout is from the fight. Hopefully nobody suspended for a game. Dylan Mitchell got kicked out of this game. Expect maybe some suspensions. I would have to imagine Duncan Powell is going to get told to sit for a few games, hopefully the entire season, if I'm being honest. But we will see. Hopefully nothing too crazy for St. John's as they go on to play Marquette on Wednesday. He's Justin Kramer. I'm David Baroff. Thank you guys so much for listening. We are back safe and sound from Providence. No fights for us, no clotheslines for us. We are all good and in one piece. Johnny Nation, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all the text messages from all of Johnny Nation who absolutely blew up my phone and Justin's phone that told us to get out of there safely, which was sad that we had to get those text messages, but it's true. No issues there. We are back. We are good to go. Thank you so much for listening, Johnny Nation. We'll catch you next time.